Last time I covered the story, I said that I wanted to wait until Hellena Taylor responds before we can put a bow on this whole Bayonetta 3 situation, and she has finally responded. And while she continues to protest, what her response ultimately proves is that the reports surrounding the clarifications of what actually transpired behind the scenes and what she was actually offered to return as Bayonetta for Bayonetta 3 were accurate, and that Hellena Taylor did misrepresent the way things played out. What she said during her initial video messages was that she was offered a low pay of $4,000 flat to play Bayonetta for the entirety of Bayonetta 3, and therefore she called for a boycott, calling for people to recognize this injustice. She called out Hideki Kamiya and implied that he made her an insulting offer before offering her the $4,000 flat rate. And she also called out Jennifer Hale, and while she didn't use her name, it was very clear who she was referring to, and basically said she has no right to say that, she's Bayonetta, and that instigated harassment against Jennifer Hale. And this all ultimately started a major discourse surrounding how much voice actors are paid and just the general low floor that the current standard rates are sitting at. And look, plenty of people wanted to believe her when somebody comes out as a victim. The hope is that they're being truthful and they're approaching this conversation in good faith. And because voice actors are so used to the kinds of lowball rates that they tend to get, a lot of people are like, this is very much a plausible scenario that she got offered this little money for the work as, the lead actor in a major IP. But Hideki Kamiya implied that there were aspects to Hellena's story that were not true. He did it in the worst way possible, in a way that made it more difficult to give him the benefit of the doubt, but turns out, there was more to the story. Jennifer Hale had to put out a statement because of the harassment instigated by Hellena, where she said, hey, let's ultimately resolve everything amicably and respectfully, and saying I care for my peers, my reputation shows it, and indeed it does. And Jennifer Hale also implied that there was more to the story than meets the eye by retweeting this Twitter thread that essentially highlights how misinformation can spread. And then came the report from investigative journalist Jason Schreier, who published the following Bloomberg article where he highlighted what he heard behind the scenes, what he saw behind the scenes, and based on two people familiar with the negotiations as well as documentation reviewed by Bloomberg, the situation is very different from the one that Hellena Taylor presented. The reports relay that Platinum Games was actually determined to rehire Hellena Taylor, that what they offered was actually $3,000 to $4,000 per 4-hour session for at least 5 sessions, bringing the actual rate that she was offered to voice Bayonetta for all of Bayonetta 3 to roughly $15,000 to $20,000, at least $15,000. And apparently in response, Hellena Taylor asked for a 6-figure sum as well as residuals on the game. Platinum later offered Taylor a cameo in the game after she had turned down the role for the fee of 1 session, $4,000, which she turned down. And in response to all of this, what Hellena Taylor told Bloomberg was that this whole account was an absolute lie and that Platinum was trying to save their ass on the game, and proceeded by saying that I would like to put this whole bloody franchise behind me, quite frankly, and get on with my life in the theater, which was not a good look, given that in her video messages she was talking about how much she cares about this franchise, and now she's like, well, I don't care anymore. I just want to move on from this, forget everything. And this story garnered further credence when a number of other journalists began to report that they have heard similar things. Stephen Totilo tweeted that he heard from a good source as well that $15,000 was about what was actually offered to Hellena Taylor, and Andy Robinson from Video Games Chronicle corroborated Jason Schreier's reporting, and he noted as much in his article, where scrolling down you'll find this quote, VGC can corroborate Bloomberg sources via our own. So this all very quickly became a very bad look for Hellena Taylor. This all certainly made it look like Hellena Taylor lied by omission. She left out key details and woefully misrepresented how negotiations actually transpired behind the scenes. And now Hellena Taylor has responded via Twitter. She goes into a lot more detail this time, and what she's ultimately done is confirm the investigative reports that Platinum Games did in fact offer Hellena Taylor roughly $15,000 to play Bayonetta for Bayonetta 3, rather than the $4,000 flat rate that Hellena Taylor insinuated. And insinuated isn't even the right word, it's exactly what she said. Hellena Taylor began by saying that it has come to my attention that some people are calling me a liar and gold digger. I feel the need to defend myself and my reputation in the industry. See thread. As I posted on part 3 of my video thread, I explained that their first offer was too low. That offer was $10,000 total. $10,000 is very much significantly more than an alleged $4,000 flat fee. And then she essentially further corroborates the investigative reports by saying that I then wrote in Japanese to Hideki Kamiya asking for what I was worth. I thought that as a creative he would understand. He replied saying how much he valued my contribution to the game and how much the fans wanted me to voice the game. I was then offered an extra $5,000, which lines up with what Bloomberg said here, amounting to at least $15,000. But you omitted that specific figure and made it sound like the initial offer was actually even worse than the alleged final $4,000 flat fee to voice the character for the whole game. Here are her exact words.
They then sent me an insulting offer. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to write to Hideki Kamiya. I got a reply. That was when they offered me $4,000.
And keep in mind that she doesn't mention that this $4,000 was actually what was offered for a cameo after she had turned down the $15,000 or so offer that was initially presented to her before she said, that's not enough, I'm not returning. And in part 1, she very clearly alleged that the $4,000 flat fee wasn't per session, but rather for the whole game. Here's what she said.
The final offer to do the whole game as a buyout, a flat rate, was $4,000.
She very clearly said to do the whole game as a buyout, flat rate. She then brings up her claim that this is a $450 million franchise, not counting merchandise. What plenty of people are wondering is, where did you get this figure, $450 million franchise? If you ask somebody like Jason Schreier, what he'll say is that $450 million is a fiction and frankly absurd figure for the Bayonetta IP. Now, from what I've seen, we don't have exact figures for how many copies the Bayonetta IP has sold, but generally estimates seem to be somewhere between 2 million plus to 3 million plus units. Multiplying that by $60, you get somewhere between $120 million plus and $180 million plus in revenue. These are still speculative estimates, so don't quote me on that. But it seems clear that the $450 million figure is an exaggeration, and that more accurate figures might be sitting closer to the low $100 million. And given that Hellena Taylor has now proven to be unreliable when it comes to properly presenting a story or information, this $450 million figure for how much the franchise has made is also likely something that cannot be trusted. She then continues by elaborating that she did in fact turn down and decline the $15,000 offer to voice Bayonetta for all of Bayonetta 3. I then heard nothing from them for 11 months. They then offered me a flat fee to voice some lines for $4,000. Any other lies, such as $4,000 for 5 sessions, are total fabrications. Number one, the details you're presenting here are completely different from what you presented in your videos. Offering you a flat fee to voice some lines for $4,000 is very different from what you said here.
To do the whole game as a buyout, a flat rate, was $4,000.
You very clearly implied the most they were willing to offer me throughout the entirety of these negotiations was the $4,000 flat rate. Second, she doesn't seem to understand here that when it comes to union gigs, which Bayonetta 3 is, actors have to be paid by session, and it seems likely that the $4,000 was the session fee. A session can be up to 4 hours, but even if you don't use up the full 4 hours, even if they only needed you for 5 minutes, they still have to pay you the session fee in its entirety. So I'm pretty damn sure that the $4,000 was the session fee and that she was called in to voice some lines that wouldn't have taken the 4 hours. She was given this rate because that was the rate that was initially offered to her. And so her saying that it's a lie that she was offered $4,000 per session for 5 sessions and calling that a total fabrication, it almost feels to me like she doesn't really know the ins and outs of how union rates work when it comes to voiceover gigs. And so she's spouting all this, like not understanding what was the deal that was actually presented to her is the sense that I'm getting. She then insists that there were no extensive negotiations. I've also been informed of ridiculous fiction, such as I asked for $250,000. I'm a team player. I was just asking for a fair living wage in line with the value that I bring to this game. Now, Bloomberg didn't provide an exact figure. What they said was Taylor asked for a 6-figure sum as well as residuals on the game. So the allegations that she asked for $250,000 didn't come from this report. It might have been just, randos on the internet. I don't know. Okay, if it wasn't $250,000, then what was the counteroffer that you made? What would you have considered a fair living wage? You once again are leaving out information and keeping things vague. And I'm not usually one to ask for information like this, but Hellena instigated this whole situation, and she has yet to show any real proof or receipts. And we're at a point now where not only is Hellena Taylor's representation of the situation is being called into question, we've also got enough proof on Platinum's side of things based on investigative reports that the burden of proof now lies on Hellena Taylor if she wants to insist that her side of the story is more accurate. She finally concludes with, "I could not talk about the game because of NDAs, but I happily answered fan letters, emails, signed posters, recorded voice messages for weddings and birthdays. I kept up interest in the game during the long periods of radio silence from Platinum." Hellena then further elaborated with, "The only time I was ever at a game conference or convention, I felt weird asking fans for money for a signature as they had already paid for the game, and I was grateful that they liked my work and the character, so I donated 100% of signing fees to charity." Look, that's great and all that Hellena Taylor is so dedicated to charity, but it doesn't change the fact that the way she approached this discourse right here, the way she presented the scenario and situation, just muddled the discussion surrounding voice actor wages. Now, making bad optics worse is this tweet right here. "I will post the 14 charities so that you can donate to charity instead of buying this game from corrupt, greedy people. There are people who are attempting to throw shade and discredit what I say. The industry is powerful. They have powerful journalists too." Now she's insinuating that the investigative reports that provided more clarity on this situation are essentially bought for, that there's all some conspiracy, that the games industry and the journalists are working together to try to stain Helena's image for the sake of preserving Platinum's reputation, is essentially what she's vaguely low-key saying here. Except anyone who's followed the careers of the likes of Jason Schreier, Stephen Totillo, and Andy Robinson, these are all people who have called out the games industry's BS on a number of occasions through a number of investigative reports and have simply shed light on the truth behind what's going on. She's now trying to instigate backlash against journalists the same way she instigated backlash against Jennifer Hale, except what she's saying here is not just an opinion about whether somebody has the right to say I'm Bayonetta. What she's presenting here is an accusation that questions the integrity of the investigative reports, which is baffling when you consider that Hellena Taylor herself, through her recent tweets and responses, essentially corroborated Jason Schreier's report and the myriad sources who have spoken out to clarify the situation. She's given these reports further credence, and at the same time, she's saying that we shouldn't be trusting these journalists. Jason Schreier did have something to say about claims that he's siding with corporations instead of workers. He tweeted, "There are also some who went after me over the last week for siding with capital over labor. First of all, my job is to side with the truth. Second, consider the labor that was harmed here. Developers, localizers, even other voice actors. Getting the truth out helps them all." I couldn't agree more. Calling out Hellena Taylor for misrepresenting this whole situation isn't a defense for corporations. It's just clarifying what exactly happened so we can have constructive discussions about these issues, because fights that are worth fighting for have to be done right. It cannot be done in bad faith. It cannot be done through misinformation, because that just muddles the conversation. It makes it harder for us to make progress and to change hearts and minds. It might lead to corporations being more restrictive about the ways they negotiate contracts with voice actors. And at the end of the day, it's a very rocky foundation when a movement is based on a lie. That should never be the case. Situations like these where the voice actor was the one approaching this whole discussion in bad faith only gives the corporations and the entities that would deny progress more ammunition. It gives voice actors less leverage, and this just makes all of us look bad. It's just embarrassing for the entire VO industry that somebody would poison the entire well like this. The best ammunition to fight the good fight is the truth, to expose actual ways that corporations have abused and victimized actors and the like, present those, allow that to generate a discussion and constructive conversation that can allow us to fight for what we're worth. And here's the thing, I feel like if Hellena Taylor had presented the facts in detail accurately, she could have made the argument that I deserve to be paid more than $15,000 to voice Bayonetta for Bayonetta 3 for the third major outing of this major IP, for this lead role, this character that is widely recognized and garnered a significant amount of support and potentially started a constructive conversation about how low the floor of voiceover wages and pay and treatment currently is. I don't think there's anything wrong with what Helena's fighting for and what she's questioning in terms of the current status quo, but her approach is just it completely messed everything up. But in light of all of this, something that should be kept in mind was how easy it was for even voice actors who know the industry to look at what Hellena initially claimed and be like, yeah, that sounds normal. That sounds about right in this industry. Rami Ismail put it aptly in one of the tweets in this series of posts when he said, in this case, it should be notable how easy it was for industry folks to accept this story. We know that as an industry, we're underpaying workers in all sorts of disciplines, and the idea of someone getting $4,000 for a lead role in a full game sounded fully plausible. What does it say about how low the current floor is when it comes to voiceover wages and treatment when voice actors are looking at this situation as normal, while everyone outside the industry are looking from the outside in going, wait, really? That's how little you can get paid for some of these major projects? That goes to highlight how accustomed voice actors are to being woefully underpaid and or woefully underappreciated. The fact that it was so easy to believe Helena's story says a lot about the current state of these industries. Stephen Totilo put it aptly a few days back, if the $15,000 is accurate, there will be room for debate about what video game voice actors get for big roles. They still don't get residuals. Here's another tweet that put it aptly, I hope that whatever the outcome of the situation is, it doesn't take away from the actual discussion that should be taking place about unfair compensation across the voice acting, the voiceover, and other industries, and how residuals need to become industry standard. And I'll bring this up again. I know that these thousands of dollars seems like a lot of money to a lot of people, but A, I don't think a voice actor should just strive for the bare minimum financial success. I think they should be able to strive to be financially comfortable. And B, that money really isn't as much as it seems when you consider the fact that voice actors are constantly applying for new jobs through auditions, because what gigs they do get are very short-lived. Lead roles like Bayonetta and, other major characters that potentially could pay more are much fewer and further between compared to the smaller roles that, aren't as influential and don't pay as much. And it can be really expensive to live in places like LA, where you kind of want to be because it is such a central hub when it comes to professions like voiceover. Voice actors never know how busy they'll be, because even great talent can have moments of famine versus feast, because just sometimes you have a bad streak. You just are afflicted by bad luck, and then sometimes you're afflicted by really great luck. And as far as residuals go, that is a standard in every other entertainment industry. In voiceover, there is a special exception where actors don't get residuals even if they are the major lead role and character in a major multi-million, or depending on the IP, sometimes multi-billion-dollar IP. So these discussions are still worth having, and Hellena Taylor could have potentially laid the groundwork for those discussions to happen constructively, but then she had to essentially, again, lie by omission and essentially put a stain on this whole discussion. You can't garner sympathy and support for a cause that's built on a morally questionable foundation. But yeah, it's looking like we can finally sort of put a bow on this thing, and we have a pretty good idea of what might have transpired behind the scenes, unless there is some crazy new information that's presented down the line, which I'm feeling probably won't happen. But if it does, I'll be sure to keep you guys updated, and maybe that'll add more context to everything. But in this case, Hellena is the one who approached this whole situation in the worst way possible. And she's completely tarnished her reputation in one fell swoop based on how the internet has been reacting and based on the information that we have now. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything you need to know about the latest surrounding the Bayonetta 3 voiceover compensation controversy. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Hellena Taylor's statements. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.